Welcome to Faces of the Pandemic. I'm Jared Santek, Artistic Director at Right on Door County. We're very proud to be partnering with Door County Library and to welcome you to NEA Big Read Door County. The NEA Big Read is a program of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with Arts Midwest. I have a few housekeeping announcements before we start today's conversation. Please know that this program may touch on varying points of view. We thank you for being open to hearing others' opinions and participating in intellectual freedom in a respectful manner. Please make sure that you are muted at all times. We may mute you if we notice there is extra unneeded sound. Please use the chat feature to ask questions of our panelists. We cannot promise that all questions will be used during this session, but we thank you for your participation. This event includes closed captioning and live transcription. Please click the CC or closed caption symbol in the bottom toolbar to then click Show Subtitle. You will not be able to have chat and closed captioning enabled at the same time. Zoom toggles back and forth between these two functions. This afternoon's event is being recorded and will be available for viewing on doorcountyreads.org and on the Door County Library's YouTube channel. With that, I'd like to get our program started by introducing our facilitator for today, who is stepping in very last minute to help us out due to a change in programming. So please welcome Bret Bicoy, Director of the Door County Community Foundation.
Thank you, Jared. Let's begin today's conversation first by introducing our guests. Phil Berndt is the Membership Director of Destination Door County and has served in that role for almost 17 years. It's his job to advance Door County's critically important tourism industry through education, marketing, and networking opportunities for local businesses. During the off-season, Phil has been known to travel the world, including a recent visit to a tiny little island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where my family is from, namely Molokai, Hawaii. Welcome, Phil. With your husband, Brian, giving you travel directions, we're always relieved when you manage to find your way home.
Me too.
Dr. James Heiss is the Chief Medical Officer of the Door County Medical Center. Under his leadership, the Medical Center has played perhaps the central role in our community's medical response to the COVID-19 crisis. Of course, that's just his day job. By night, Jim has become Door County's first genuine Facebook heartthrob as he regularly goes online to answer people's questions about the crisis and help us separate coronavirus fact from fiction. Jim, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. If I'm someone's heartthrob, they've got very poor vision.
Kara Northrup is one of the owners of Main Street Market in Egg Harbor. She arrived in Door County in 1987 to help her parents build the market. Today, she and her husband, Steve, are now teaching their adult children the business as well. Karen has served on the boards of countless charities, including the Door Community Auditorium and the Door County Community Foundation. She is also one of the founding members of the legendary, epic, and virtually unstoppable Yellow Canaries trivia team. Karen, we're glad you're here.
I'm glad you got that in about the Canaries.
Gotta put it in there somewhere. Dr. Dennis White is a clinical psychologist in private practice in Sturgeon Bay. His specialty is psychotherapy, and he works with individuals, couples, and entire families. Dennis is also an internationally recognized expert on the exchange student experience, and in normal years, he would be traveling the world to teach and speak at Rotary Youth Exchange conferences. Dennis also holds the record as the longest tenured member of the Rotary Club of Sturgeon Bay that has somehow managed to avoid ever having to serve as president of the club. Dennis, despite your unwillingness to accept any responsibility whatsoever at Rotary, we're glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
And finally, Catherine Young is an accomplished author whose writing has been nominated for multiple awards, including the Pushcart Prize and a Best American Essay. Her memoir, Black Diamonds, Blue Flames, A Childhood Colored by Coal, was awarded the Gray Wolf Press Nonfiction Prize. She is a former National Park Ranger, a former farmer, an educator, and is the one person on this panel whom I do not know well enough to make fun of. So I'll just say, Catherine, thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks for the welcome.
Now, Jim, to get started, I've heard you talk a lot about how we and the public should change our lives during this health crisis. And yet your life has changed pretty dramatically as well. You've always been important to our community, but you've worked in relative obscurity. Now you've become the public face of Door County's response to COVID-19. How has that changed the way you do your job on a daily basis?
You know, I don't know how it really changes my day-to-day activity. When this whole thing started, I was just looking back and realized that in about, I don't know, 2 weeks, it'll be a year since we started the first Facebook Live, and it was really just a situation where I sort of felt it was really important that we got the information out right away, and people were aware, because what I didn't want and what I have continued to not want through this entire pandemic is I just don't want people to panic about this and be afraid of it. Now, obviously, this is a scary situation, but you know, thankfully, we're a little bit cloistered up here in Door County. But it was just important to me to get the information out. So I think it was more the desire to, for one, control the message, but also, you know, I guess in general, even when I practice medicine, I don't want people to be afraid. I want them to be informed, and that just kind of carried over.
Do you feel like that you've been able to accomplish that goal over time? I mean, one of the things that we've heard of on a national level is recommendations have changed as knowledge has changed, but inherent in that is in uncertainty. And so there have been criticisms of some of our national experts in saying, you said one thing yesterday and another thing today. Have you felt something similar in terms of the guidance you've offered and how people have reacted to you?
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. I mean, certainly early on, we were telling people, don't wear masks. A mask won't help you. And I remember saying those exact words. And the reason was partly because we didn't want to have a run on masks and not be able to actually have the people that needed the masks to have them. But more than that, as we understood the virus at the time, it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And then pretty quickly, as we learned more, it became obvious that, okay, at the very least, even if the mask doesn't protect you from getting the virus, you're not going to get as big of a dose if you get it with a mask on. And so pretty quickly we changed our tune. And I know I had people saying, well, you changed your mind, or you were wrong the first time. And what my response to that has always been, well, that's science. That's the definition of science. We don't sit there and say one thing and hold on to it with grim death, and not because we don't want to change our tune, so to speak. We have to change our tune as we know more. And of course, we knew very little at the beginning. We know a little bit more now than we knew then, but this is still brand new in the overall context of diseases and things. We're just playing at this point, but we know a heck of a lot more now. So I'm used to hearing that, but I think I've certainly heard it a lot less over the last maybe 4 months.
I suppose more than anything else, adaptability or the comfort with the ambiguity of the situation is something we've all had to adjust to. And that makes me think a little bit, Phil, about what you do in your work. I mean, your job is to bring people to Door County, and really the measure of your professional success is pretty easy, right? The more people come here on a daily basis, the better you're doing. But then all of a sudden you've got this push and pull where you want tourists to come here to keep our businesses open, but you don't want too many tourists here at any one time. How have you adapted and adjusted in your work to sort of deal with these competing interests?
I think the first response that we had is, first of all, we have a really comprehensive crisis management plan in place at Destination Door County. So immediately when we saw this coming down the pike, I had been traveling to Vietnam, and all of a sudden we hear about this, and this is serious. So I started researching it myself to learn more. In coming back, we immediately recognized that this was going to be very serious and started enacting our crisis management plan really before anything else started that way. And what we saw was the immediate shift to be able to say to people, we need you to just pause for a moment. Let's find ways to think about planning. And actually, if you could plan a pandemic, when it arrived was probably one of the more ideal spots for our destination anyway, because it is a planning period. And we could say, let's just sit still for a minute and try to figure this out. Then we started to realize that some people are not going to sit still, but what could we do as far as helping to make sure that everyone was safe? And that's when we started producing the safety videos. And as a business community, we were looking, we're looking for guidelines. We really thought that they, should be coming any minute now. And then we discovered that they weren't coming. And how could we create them? And really started working with other destinations across the nation and put together, with the help of the hospital and the task force, putting together the commitment to cleanliness and safety. And that was very helpful in raising the bar as far as education goes. And while most of our marketing does not go here in the county, so most of our residents wouldn't see that part, almost everything we were sending out there was about the safety aspect of, if you're choosing to come up and visit this summer, please make sure that you know that you need to wear masks, that you need to do social distancing. And we had, a lot of other components that made that enjoyable. But that was it was a big deal to realize that our businesses relied on those visitors coming, but as a community, we needed to protect the community. So it was really difficult to find that balance. We were working really hard to slow it down. Yeah.
So it makes me think of what, when Jim was talking about how, guidance at one point, it's an evolving process, right? So from medically, what's an appropriate way to act is as we learn more, we change that guidance. Did you find that something similar in your line of work in terms of the messages you were carrying forth to the visitor community? And how did businesses react to that? Because, there are some who have been gung-ho about bringing folks in, and there are others who've been very reluctant to have anybody come in. Where do you find that balance in your work?
One of the first things we did was to survey our visitors. We have a very engaged list of about almost 250,000 visitors that interact with us actively, regularly. And so we put out a survey to the visitors asking them, what are their expectations? What are they doing during this period? And we found that overwhelmingly about 95% said, we are not interested in going anywhere that doesn't enforce masking and social distancing. So knowing that 95% of the travelers out there felt that way, that they weren't quite most weren't ready to travel, but that they recognize that they probably would have that need. Most people can't stay locked up forever. So it had more to do with the education part. And we really prided ourselves on not going on any hyperbole. Everything that we did, we were going deep into the science of it to determine what we should be doing, and working with public health and with the hospital and getting the information that was pertinent. And so we've been pretty even keeled about that whole message of these are the key points that you need to do.
It makes me think, as you're talking a little bit about adjusting to things like masking and social distancing, and that makes me think, Karen, of your business. I've always thought one of the great challenges of shopping at your store in normal times is that it's virtually impossible just to run in and out, because Main Street Market is like the social center of the community up there. And inevitably you walk in the door and you're going to run into somebody who wants to talk with you. So the 5-minute in and out becomes 25 minutes pretty quickly. And yet now you've got a world in which we don't want to be together at all, and out of fear and legitimate concern. How did you sort of adapt what you do for a living up there from such a social fabric of the community to a place where it's difficult to have people gather at one time?
Well, in the very beginning, we closed our doors, and we went strictly to online, and developed
You didn't close your shop. You closed your doors.
Yeah, we did.
But you were still working, right?
Well, right. We were still working. but we didn't let anybody in.
Okay.
We totally locked down the store, and the only people in the store itself was our staff. And we had about 20, 25 people, and we spent a lot of time together. But in the very beginning of March, it became, like you said, when people kind of started figuring out what was going on, people started to get very, very, very nervous. And we could tell very obviously that our customers were nervous, and people were hoarding. It was very, very weird, just really odd. And you're absolutely right. People do tend to sort of gather and socialize here. And we actually closed the doors for more reasons than that, but that really did stop it. So all of our gathering and socializing took place online with people. Now, ever since we did open back up, our customers feel very safe here. And I can't even tell you how many customers we have where this is the only business they ever go to. They don't go anywhere else. And so they do kind of socialize here. We don't, we all wear masks and everyone's very careful, but our customers do get the level of socialization they are comfortable with here now for the last 6 months.
Oh, so for some people then really you might be the only place in which they cross paths with
Right.
other human beings right now. That's a remarkable place to be in terms of a business, to play that kind of role. That makes me think of, Catherine, your business is, how you do your business is completely the opposite. You're a writer, and in so many ways, isolating yourself from others is a big part of your professional life, right? You go into a room all alone and you start writing. And yet all of a sudden, sort of that norm of that professional isolation is becoming the norm for the rest of us, right? In terms of almost universal isolation and how we become disconnected from other people. What's it been like to watch others as they begin to adjust to these new norms that in many ways are commonplace for you?
Well, it isn't just the fact that I'm isolated as a writer. I'm isolated as a writer because I'm a disabled person. And my disabling conditions keep me isolated with immune dysfunction and extreme chemical sensitivity, MCS. And what that has meant for me is that, I'll show you, I have worn the bandit mask for 25 years. And so even when I was teaching little kids, I started to wear the mask. And little kids handle it much better than adults. At times, pre-COVID, I was treated as if I was a terrorist. I looked scary in my mask, or people were afraid that I might have some terrible disease I was going to give them. Or maybe I was just a weirdo wearing this mask. And the best way for me to reach people was to reach little kids, to pull the mask down and smile and say, "You can tell I'm smiling." And the kids would respond, and then their families would respond. And that was limited. I didn't go out very much. Disability means that you don't get to meet your needs the normal way. That's one aspect of it. And also, I am a writer, but I also am someone who has a teaching degree, an MFA in creative writing. And I could not go on a university campus. My program was entirely online in Canada. And then I couldn't find spaces where I could lead workshops. And at times I requested it, but it just seemed like people weren't ready for that idea. With one exception, there was the Minnesota Northwoods Writing Conference in 2013, where I was given a scholarship to attend. I wanted to because I wanted to work with a particular writer. And when I was exploring how I could be in Bemidji, Minnesota, I thought that might be good. I found out I really couldn't be on the campus. Accommodations such as being in classrooms or being in a dorm room weren't going to work, and I couldn't stay in a motel. And staying in a tent means I'm exposed to chemicals and exhaust. That wasn't going to work. And so I asked them if they would Skype me in, and they did. And so for a whole week, I was Skyped in to a writing workshop, carried around on an iPad. My face was on an iPad. And I was in my class and I was at all the performances. And I even at one point asked my classmates to take me to their picnic table so I could have a picnic with them. And then they forgot me on the table. They left me there. The person who carried me there forgot. But I at least got to hang out with them a bit, and it was really great. So I saw the potential in it, and I was trying to explain that to people at universities. You can include me. You haven't changed your classrooms to allow me in. It's different for people in wheelchairs. They're a lot more visible.
So in
But
some
somehow,
way,
yeah. So anyway, so to get to the point of COVID, everybody caught up to me. And that's the strangest thing in all of this, where people have had reversals in their lives. I also have had reversals. So now people discuss masks. I saw this coming on in March. I was just dumbfounded, that people were talking about masks and different styles, different patterns. There are themed masks you can buy,
Sure.
with different designs on them. And then the other piece is that I'm talking to you on Zoom. I could not participate as a writer or in any social situations. I am now singing on Zoom, leading songs for large groups of people. They are muted. I am leading writing workshops, and I'm participating in all kinds of ways. So the thing that I asked for all those years ago is now coming to pass. And I just hope that everybody keeps that in mind, that this is a component that could include all kinds of people who have been left out.
So in many ways, the interesting thing about your adjustment is it's less about adjusting to this camera or this way of life. It's adjusting to the fact that it's now becoming a little bit more normal and accepted, which is sort of a fascinating perspective. But it makes me think, Dennis, from your perspective professionally, I mean, helping people deal with change, these sort of individual experiences, whether they be a crisis or otherwise, is kind of how you make a living. And yet, while we're all experiencing this crisis individually, it's actually a trauma that we're all going through simultaneously. It's this weird shared experience, but it's a shared experience that we're enduring while we're separated from one another. I'm wondering, what's that been like for you? I mean, what's changed for you over the last year in terms of what you're seeing with your clients and how you deal with your clients?
Well, Brent, first of all, consider me a politician who can not answer your question, but pretend that you asked a different question and then answer that one, which is what I'm going to do right now. And that is, I'm going to welcome all of the participants. It's nice to know that there are more people in the audience than on the panel. That's not always the case when I make presentations. Secondly, of those of you who are listening in and watching, this is about a book, isn't it? Yes, we haven't actually named it yet, and I did bother to read it. And so some of the similarities that I have seen are coming true, not the apocalyptic thing where 20 years after there's no television, there's no internet, but the isolation you're talking about, Brent. And it reminds me of the first line from Anna Karenina that says that happy families are all alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. We're all out there having our problems in our own ways, and we don't know it. And that is very unfortunate. And I spend a lot of time with my clients who speak somewhat like Catherine does, that for anxiety reasons or something else, they don't go out, or they don't go out much, and they're kind of wondering what the hell's wrong with all the rest of us that we're having trouble with this. So they have shown a resilience and a strength that I think the rest of us need to appreciate. They have this adaptability, they have tolerance, they have the ability to start over when they run into an obstacle. So I've learned a great deal from my own clients, and I find that I have a mixture of people who are coming to see me because of their reaction to COVID-19, and others that just would be coming to see me anyway. But I'm doing it all virtually. I tried a couple of times doing face-to-face and in our area when things looked like they were getting better, but quickly abandoned that. And I'm not trying to be facetious about the terrible tragedy that this has been to so many people, but the biggest personal effect, other than not traveling around the world, is that I do my work about 25 feet from my refrigerator. And so I have gained probably 25 pounds since March, and I'm not proud of it. But I will admit it, you know, admitting it is the first step in recovering, right? So now, what was your question?
I don't know anymore.
Go
It's sort
on,
of long,
I'm sorry.
long since been lost, lost. But you know, though, that sort of brings up sort of another interesting question, which is that how each of your how each of you have changed the way you do business. You know, Dennis, you're talking about how you're visiting with your clients and patients through this thing a little more frequently. Yeah, I wonder. I'm thinking of you, Karen, for an example. You talked about closing your shop during the stay-at-home order and yet still serving your clientele. But as best I can tell, this wasn't something you'd been set up to do prior to that. What was that like, that adjustment period and trying to build something from scratch to take care of your customers?
It was not easy. And we honestly, we made the decision on a Wednesday to close on Friday. So we had really about a day and a half to figure out what we were going to do. And the way our store is set up, we have a 12-foot or 15-foot counter right in the front of the store with two very big picture windows that look out into the parking lot. And just the logistics of how our store is built made that just so much more possible, because that became our office. We brought our laptop from home. We bought a portable printer. We set up, that was the office. That was where we took all our orders, where we organized everything. Every night we would go home. So we kind of had a plan. And our daughter, who lives in the Chicago area, actually she lived in the city during this time. She came to visit us and ended up staying for 2.5 weeks. And she helped us set the whole online process up and get everything ready. Thank God. I don't think we could have done it without her. But every night, Steve and I and Regan would go home and we'd think, okay, that really didn't work very well. So let's tweak it and let's do this and that'll work. We did that for about 5 days in a row, which was very confusing to our customers. But at the end of it, we really had a really great system that worked really well. We had, like I said, 20 to 25 people who worked for us full time at the time. And then all the kids were out of school. So when it actually got really going and really busy, I had 4 high school kids who really didn't have anything to do at school. So they came to work, which was awesome. We figured out we changed our hours. So we were only open from 9 to 5 or 9 to 4 we were open. So, and we needed to do that because we needed everybody here for the hours we were open. It was incredibly intense. It was really hard to do. And so we found pretty quickly that we couldn't do it with kind of a skeleton staff. It really needed to be done with our whole staff. Dennis, unlike you, almost everyone on our staff lost weight. My husband lost 15 pounds.
Oh my.
Just from.
Can I go work for you?
He would literally, we all have Fitbits or, watches, iWatches. Steve would literally walk 15 miles in a day in the store shopping for people. And we had other people that did that too, but Steve did the most. And he's literally, he lost 15 pounds, which he's not put back on yet. But once we really figured it out and we got our customers trained on what they were doing, it was actually a pretty awesome experience. And like you kind of mentioned with the social. So I was the person who got all the emails. So all the emails, I was the one who read all the emails, who printed all the orders. And so I would ask people questions. So I would have these online conversations with our customers about their orders, okay, this doesn't look right. Do you need this? We're out of this. And so we really actually had quite a rapport going with our customers without them ever stepping foot in the store.
I suppose that was for some folks, especially during that very scary time when we were all staying at home and didn't know what this was about, that
Right.
that was their human connection, that interaction with
Right.
you at the store. You're
Right.
already the social center, and it's sort of become that in a virtual way during that time.
Right. And we had the big windows right in the front. And so that's where I would always sit. And that's where we would set up all the orders. So, you know, all of our people, we'd be like waving at our customers who were out in the parking lot. And we would take their groceries out. So every once in a while, if it was someone special or someone, you know, we knew really well, like I'd go out or Steve would go out or somebody would specifically go out to their car and, you know, have a little chat with them. And yeah, I mean, we managed to stay very, very connected with our customers, which it was pretty incredible, actually.
When I think of those big windows, I'm sorry, Phil.
I was going to say, I can attest that it was a real lifesaver. That Karen, you guys did such a great job adapting and then evolving so quickly. As a customer, it was really a lifesaver. It meant so much, and the ease at which you made the process work, and we recognized that it was evolving, but the changes that you made really, it really has been, it was a very slick operation during a very stressful time. So
Thank you.
really kudos to you.
When I think of all that glass and the big window and you sit in front of it, I cannot help but envision what it's like to walk into the medical center these days with plexiglass everywhere and, you know, and keeping everybody separate. And now I'm sure, Jim, if I asked you what you did to adapt to this world, we could spend the next hour with you articulating those things. So I won't ask you to articulate everything, but articulate for me the one or two things that changed most about how you do your business there on a daily basis at the medical center.
Well, you know, for me, it's a big piece is just the wearing of the mask for patients, because my clinical job is as a hospitalist, and so I take care of patients in the hospital. And so, you know, it's being able to for people to see my expression and understand when I tend to be a little bit lighthearted, and so when I make a joke about something, you know, make sure that they understand that's what I'm doing. So that was a big change. But I tell you, taking care of COVID patients was a whole new thing, because we were talking about negative pressure rooms. We had ante rooms put up. We were all dressed up in gowns or still are really, but gowns and N95 masks and a face shield over that. And it was really, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and I'd never experienced anything like this, where, you know, if you don't take appropriate precautions, at least, especially at the height of this, there was pretty much a certainty you were going to get it, because that's how infectious coronavirus has been. So that's been a big piece, you know. So little bit of the patient communication is there, but just you mentioned the plexiglass. I mean, it's just I never fail to, you know, you walk around and you in any business and you see all the plexiglass that's up, and I continue to occasionally just stop and say, wow, you know, life has really changed in a huge fundamental way. And I honestly can't wait for it to get back to the way it was. And I'm not so sure we're going to get back to the way it was. We'll have to see.
It makes me, you know, I went in, it's probably more than people want to know, but I went in for my first colonoscopy now that I'm in my 50s, and it got delayed a year, which I was really excited about, by the way. But eventually I went into there. But what was very trying for me was how alone I felt. You know, I pulled up in the parking lot, I called, and I understand all reasons for this, but then I'm told when I can come into the building, my wife can't go with me. Now, this was as routine, I imagine, a thing as there is, but I'm in the room, getting undressed, putting a gown on, getting knocked out, and I'm doing it alone. And then to come out and awake and I'm isolated from everybody. And it was a very trying experience through a pretty routine procedure. I mean, what's that like dealing with patients who aren't just going through something routine like me, but have a very serious concern, totally unrelated to COVID, but are affected by it because of all of the COVID protocols?
It's horrible. I mean, there's just no way around it. I mean, it's when someone is very sick and you're calling family members repeatedly to try and give them an update. And the family members want so much to be there with their loved one to be able to provide that support, and they're not able to. And I know my older brother, who has a learning disability and still lives with my parents, he was in St. Mary's Ozaki down in Mequon for about a month, from the day before Thanksgiving until just before Christmas. And my parents weren't able to go visit to any great extent. Me getting through to anybody was virtually impossible. And it was really unlike anything I had ever experienced. And it was really frustrating. So it's, I think we're looking pretty quickly now for the hospital to allow at least one visitor again, because that support is so crucial. And when it's not there, I mean, I think your example is a great one. It's a routine screening, but nonetheless, you're being put to sleep. No one's there. When you talk to your doctor after the colonoscopy, in many cases, you might as well not even have that conversation, because you probably forget about 80% of what they said. So it's so important. So yeah, it's been a big change.
Catherine, in your situation, when you talk about both because of your profession, but also some of the things that you were kind enough to share with us in terms of your own health, it's as radical a change, it sounds like, for you, but it's a change for the better in many ways, right? How have you sort of felt about that, where at the same time, the use of this camera and this communication tool makes me feel more removed from the friends and family I love, and yet for you, it's been a godsend as it's become the norm to be a connecting point? How do you feel? How do you deal with the conflicting feelings that must be inevitable that go with that change?
That's interesting. I don't feel conflict. I'm absolutely delighted that I get to be involved. I'm absolutely astounded that if I wear a mask in public now, I don't stand out. It being included in the strangest of ways. And yet I still have to do an extra layer of some things because of things like sanitizer, which is a problem for me. But for the most part, I for the first time, I have a completely booked social life. First time in 20 years since I entered the world of disability. And I have this calendar and it's completely full because a lot of other people are looking for ways to connect and learn during this time. And I'm just fortunate to be able to do that. I'm fortunate because just like you, like everyone here today, I do have access to the internet. I can imagine then that's another level of people not being included, is that they just simply don't have that access. But I am fortunate to have that access, which means that I can go in on all kinds of programs across the world. It's a lovely, lovely feeling.
Yeah. Please.
Oh, I think that it's empowering. In the loveliest of ways. Yeah. And in every event that I've been in, I have to say to people, well, you see, I'm here and normally I couldn't be. And so please keep that in mind, so that when you do your programming, please find ways to include people like me at this level.
Well, and I suspect that one of the things that we're going to take away from this whole process is the efficiency that comes from this kind of communication in terms of engaging people who wouldn't otherwise be able to participate. Part of it is the fact that those of us who are far away from each other, it's a great way to communicate. In your case, you could be down the road, but you're far away from me for a very different reason. I wonder, and I'll turn to you, Phil, and ask you this question to start with. But really, I'd love to hear from everybody on this. But Phil, what do you think what's going to continue, right? I mean, your business has changed dramatically in terms of how you do your work and how you're engaging with the visitors in this community. What do you think are some of the changes that have come about as a result of this crisis that are going to continue with us long beyond this time of the global pandemic?
I think some of especially the positive things that will come from this, I think a greater awareness of what, not just taking normal everyday tasks for granted. We saw a tremendous, tremendous boom in the interest in our natural resources. Of course, that was considered, a safe outing, that kind of a thing. But people being willing to learn more about it, becoming more aware of it. Of course, naturally we focus on those negative incidences, but more than not, I was noticing the overwhelming positive parts of the way people were interacting or reaching out. Some of the incidental engagement is missing because we're not gathering in large spaces. But I'll share that because our county is a long stretch of land, the level of engagement that we've had with members and our board, even our own staff, of coming together for board meetings where you have more of an intimacy instead of the person that is clear across the room. You don't have much face-to-face going on with most of the people at a board meeting, or those that are sitting on the same side of the table or arrangement. So we're finding a higher engagement and a higher quality engagement. Plus, people are able to be there, and we're not taking them, our members that are in Washington Island to come in for a board meeting. You have to consider all the planning, which includes almost always accommodations and 2 trips on the ferry. It's a big deal. So to be able to do some of that more environmentally friendly has been really important. But I think that will, being able to connect distant wise, and even the way we're putting together information for people to use and access, those are all things that I know that we'll take forward on the journey.
Karen, I wonder about from your perspective at the store. I mean, what do you think you're going to take with you when we sort of approach whatever normalcy we may have when this is over with?
Honestly, I think just the way we run our business won't really change that much. I think a couple of things that changed maybe in our customers' worlds a little bit is they've been much more understanding about things. I think people have just learned to not expect everything at exactly when they want it, which has been very enlightening. And I also think for our customers, they've all spent a lot of time with their families, and there have been family units that have been together for months that have never spent that much time together, especially, you have adult children or children that are a little bit older, and, those children tend to want to be gone a lot. And we've noticed that we just have families that have spent a lot of time together and have thoroughly enjoyed it and have become like fabulous cooks, and they've kind of learned to do things on their own and keep themselves busy. And I think that's going to change the way people live a little bit, which of course will affect us a little bit, but there's been a lot of really positive, kind of wonderfully amazing things have happened.
It's certainly a bad overall, but there's some silver linings to all these things you talked about. Dennis, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to call your attention that we've had some comments in the chat room from people about the book. And I will say that I found the book a difficult book to read, but nevertheless, one of the things that stands out to me that's similar to what's happened to us is how in the world could a troupe of entertainers be going around the world doing this? What's that artistic motivation that inspired them to do it? And I remember in the first, Karen was talking about that first month or so, we were all not only in a panic mode, but I think we were in a pull together mode.
Yeah.
On Saturday afternoons in Wisconsin, I don't know how many of the others of you did this, but they would, on all the radio stations in almost all the radio stations in Wisconsin at 3 o'clock, would play the jump around, the song that they play before the 4th period in football, and people went crazy. I would contacted my adult children, and at 3 o'clock on Saturday, we'd all jump around and we'd take pictures of ourselves jumping around. And so this was the epitome of together alone, or alone together, whichever way you want to say it. Now, after only not even a year, as opposed to 20 years in the book, This morning, a headline in CNN was the desperation that people feel trying to get the vaccine. And I'm sure Jim is experiencing this, because it's like, when does civilization break down? And instead of pulling together, we want to get ours, and we want to jump the line, and we want to plead special consideration. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the devolving of society in the book The Lord of the Flies, where these kids land civilized, and by the end of the book, they're eating one another. Because there's no structure. Now, we're not there, but it's just really sad to see what's happening. And it's no fault of the hospital or the public health department. They're they're the whipping boys, I suppose. But people are desperate to get this vaccine, and how they step up is a measure of our character. And I'm convinced that crises like these bring out the best and the worst in people, and you see both of them. So
well, that's an interesting perspective, because you're talking about we're all enduring the same struggle simultaneously, but now the chosen few, if you want to use it from that sort of a negative, nefarious point of view, are the ones who've been able to get the vaccine, right? And someone has to make that decision as to whether you get it or you don't. And unfortunately, we haven't had universality in terms of, from state to state, community to community, as to what those priorities are. Jim, has that manifested itself in any way in terms of how you at the medical center, either personally or as an institution, have been dealing with your patients and clients?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think, even one of our doctors, will with frequency, email me or text me and just sort of say, what about the teachers? And part of me sort of says, well, haven't you been watching the news or anything? I mean, sort of, what about the teachers? What about we should be doing, and I've had to continue to say, look, we have to go by what the state tells us to do. I mean, if we don't do it that way, then we lose our vaccinator status and we lose a lot of stuff. So it's not really an option. But I'll tell you, this is the analogy that I've used, and you guys, many of whom are more creative than I am, you can tell me if this is all just rhetorical nonsense or not. But what I've said is, look, the beginning of this pandemic, we were sort of all stuck in this morass. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know what was coming. Well, now, if you envision a train track starting at the beginning of the pandemic and going toward whatever the end is, the light at the end of the tunnel, we're all on that train, and the train has started to move. We're all moving toward this getting better and going away. So whether we're in the first train car getting vaccinated or in the last train car waiting to get vaccinated and wanting and coveting that vaccine, the entire train is moving toward the end. And so it will come, and I think, we've got a couple more vaccines that are going to be coming probably by early March. And so I do think that there's going to be a pretty quick ramp up of this. But yeah, it's been really tough, because you have people that are really, really afraid of this, correctly so, when they say, I want to get that vaccine right now. The flip side, of course, is those people that despite the fact that we're saying now isn't the time to goof this up, they're saying, well, we're not going to wear masks anymore. This is silly. I'm tired of this. As though you're being tired of this has anything to do with any of this. So yeah, that's my little political statement. So.
Right. Can I make a comment?
Please.
That kind of goes with what Dennis was saying? I think, as it applies to this book, the biggest difference I see in this book and the pandemic, one of the biggest differences is that, not to give anything away, but everybody pretty much dies within 2 days if you got it. So, it was either you lived or you died. And the people that lived they knew they were going to live. So they figured out how to survive. I think the problem with this is it just keeps going on and on and on and on and on, and we just don't know when it's going to end. So these people knew they were going to make it health-wise. They might not make it for other reasons, but this pandemic for me and for a lot of us who are out in the public, it's just like a constant little thing you have to worry about, and it's everything else you worry about in a day, you also have to worry about that. You have to worry about you or your staff or, what happens. And it's, in a lot of ways, it's easier if you just know or you don't know.
Yeah. But let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's an interesting perspective because you're, as you said, if life was like the book, we'd all have had it by now, and we all know whether we're going to live or we're not. But that's not the reality of it. And so you're dealing with not only pretty dramatic changes in your professional lives as a group, but those changes have to affect you personally when you go home at night. I mean, it just has to. You have to, it's hard to put aside these things. As you said, Karen, it's like yet another thing that I have to worry about, that I'm worrying about my staff. How has this sort of manifested itself in terms of your home life? When you walk out the door of the office or the store or wherever it is or turn off the computer, Catherine, because you're done writing. I mean, how has this sort of affected you on a daily basis in a personal way?
You're presuming she has a home life.
Well, in Karen's case, it's kind of one of the same, right? Because you were
Right.
using the example where Regan and Stephen, you were coming home at the same time. Well, I mean, what's that like when you all sort of have that, and then you have to come home and not be at work for a while? How do you separate that?
So we made fantastic dinners, and we were all in bed by 8 o'clock because we were exhausted. I mean, we were I think there's a difference between physical and mental exhaustion, and we were both. And there's still now that, once the physical exhaustion kind of, abated and at least we kind of got our bearings on that. For me, it's just mentally exhausting. I mean, it's just for so long, every single thing you did, you had to analyze and, how is it going to affect this? And what are people, how are we going to do this safely? And how am I going to make everyone feel safe coming in the store? Because we just absolutely could not keep doing what we were doing. We had to stop, and we had to open the doors. So that was exhausting, just how to figure out how to make everyone feel safe and comfortable and want to come in again. And it's constantly there, and it's very, very, very difficult. And Dennis, I'm glad to see you on there because I may need your services at some point when this is all over, because I might just be jello.
If you had told me a year ago that I would be familiar with a term called pandemic fatigue, I would tell you were crazy. And yet I have personally experienced it. I'm tired of this, and I'm not trying to whine. I mean, who isn't tired of this? And yet all of our instincts when we're tired of things is to say, I'm just not going to do it. And that's the craziest thing in the world to do. We have to keep doing what we're doing to stay safe and to be mindful of the people around us. And so I do this approximately 2-minute public service announcement on the local radio station network. Brent likes to kid me because I call it the mental health minute, and it's really 1 minute and 50 seconds. But
well, it is, Dennis.
your mental health minute and 50 seconds just doesn't, come out nicely. But anyway, the thing is, since March, every one of my presentations has been about the pandemic. And I've been doing this thing for 10 years. And it's just one more thing to talk about. What are people experiencing? How are they reacting? And so when I'm done at the end of the day, instead of watching the news, which is addictive, honestly, I watch reruns of the Andy Griffith Show because everything comes out fine in the end. And it's really nice. And I can smile and call Barney a doofus and everything's great. But that's the way I can cope with this stuff because it's all around us. You can't get away from it.
How have others sort of felt that way? I mean, I think about, again, picking on you, Jim, and what you do at the medical center, that I shared my story about what little strain I felt being in there, and you see it, tenfold with people who are dealing with real crises. And then to have to go home at night and leave that behind. How do you make that transition?
I've never really thought that much about it. I mean, I will say some of the things that I've been privileged to be able to do during this pandemic, as far as media that I do and things like that, has been really rewarding. And so that's kind of energized me. But I will say, you know, interestingly, I can't watch, Andy Griffith is a great tip, because that's like one of my favorite series, and I hadn't thought of that, but that I can't watch like a new television show or a new movie. I can't get into a narrative. I can't, and I can't read fiction. I can't do it. I mean, I don't know why. I don't have any other way to describe it. My wife too, she thinks I'm nuts, because I sort of say, I just can't do it. I can't get through a story. So for me, I would rather read nonfiction. I would rather, if I, you know, like for me, it's all, you know, Chopped on Food Network is perfect. You know, I mean, that sort of thing. But I just can't, you know, it's, and I don't know why that is. And I'm a movie guy. I mean, you know, so I don't understand what that's about there, but that's been my big thing, is it's just, and if my wife's got something on the TV, I'll have headphones on and I'll be trying to read or something, because I just can't get into it, and it just makes me crabby, and so that's been a change for me.
Now I think of Phil, you know, with your husband working at the Peninsula Players, I mean, that's gotta have been a whole nother level of
Terribly
trauma
challenging.
in some ways, right? In terms of shutting down for a season. And so you've got the challenge at home, I mean, at work and all the things you're dealing with, and you got to go home and your partner has all these other issues. I mean, how do you handle that? How do you adjust and adapt to that sort of, what did you call it, Dennis? Pandemic
Fatigue.
Pandemic fatigue.
2 words, the garage.
You're going to have to elaborate there. I'm not sure what goes on in your garage. So
my workshop is out there. I think myself, along with a lot of other friends, I have noticed, you know, one of the themes in the book is about the persistence of art and the need for art. And I know philosophically, in studying it, there isn't really a purpose for art outside of the human experience, that we find so much joy in the connectivity and the expression that we as humans feel. It's one of the few things that really kind of sets us apart. And I see with so many friends that have finally taken that time to start working on those projects that have been put aside because they just were busy and couldn't get to them, or picking up new creative outlets. And really, that is one of the most important things. We have faced some tremendous challenges, and we still do, especially both of us, you know, like many, but, and as Karen has gone through too, you have this weight on your shoulder of, how do I protect everybody involved? How do you keep yourself safe? How do you keep your neighbors safe? How do you keep your customers safe? And even at the Bureau, our main priority was the safety. How do we keep our community safe? How do we, and keeping our community safe also means, how do we prevent our businesses from going under? And you know, so you have to strike a balance. But yeah, the creative outlet has been the saving grace through all of this.
So a quick programming note, I guess, is what they call it. If people have questions that they'd like to ask, we can't promise we're going to get to all of them, but please feel free to put them in the chat. And I know that they're being watched and moderated, and both on Facebook as well as the chat for those of you who are on the Zoom call. And we will do our best to try and get to those before this day is over. But I want to follow up sort of along that line. That's like a major theme of the book, right? Which is that survival is insufficient. That we can't just keep doing these things to stay alive. At some point, life has to be worth living. And, you know, whether it be the Andy Griffith show, you know, as a distraction. And, you know, I think of it, for me, my wife and I, we spent a lot of time watching, I'm almost embarrassed to admit it, but the
More
Hallmark,
embarrassing than the Andy Griffith show?
the Hallmark Christmas love stories. I think I've watched more of those over the last
That's worse.
Last
That's
months
definitely
than I
worse.
ever in my life, because they always end up with a happy ending, right?
Always.
No, but in some ways, though, that's a distraction, right? All that is it takes my mind away from what is. You know, it's Jim, it's you talking about Chopped, right? It's a great self-contained, there's my 30 minutes and I get to watch something, and it takes my mind off of all of my worries, but it's not a reason to keep going. It's not a reason to exist. And I'm curious as to each of you, where do you sort of find that outlet in life that keeps you centered, and it keeps you grounded, and it keeps you going forward?
Well, you know, for me, I will say one of the things that's really cool, and I discovered this about 2 years ago, and it's been kind of, and what it was is I'm a season ticket holder to the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. And you say, well, how the heck can that be? I mean, it's in German. Well, they have an app. They have an app, and it's amazing what they do. And you know, I'm a lover of symphonic music, and so I've been a season ticket holder, and I watch it there. Now, what they've done is the audience is no longer there, of course, and they have the symphony on the stage, and they still put forth a season. And various other symphony orchestras around the country doing the same thing. Boston's doing it a little bit. Milwaukee is trying, and the same with theater. You know, Peninsula Players, I know, I'm sure, you know, they're all looking for ways. I know I've been a season ticket holder of the Milwaukee Rep for decades, and they've done a little bit of that, and I think everyone is trying to find that way that they can get their stuff out there, because that's one of the things that kills me. I mean, I think Phil mentioned it about keeping businesses from going under. You see the arts organizations, the theater organizations, Broadway, for heaven's sake, nothing for almost a year. We can't, like you say, survival is insufficient. We have to figure out a way to get back into this, which is part of my sort of personal mission in doing these Facebook Lives is, look, if all it takes is to wear a gosh darn mask so that I can maybe go back and see some live theater or see some live music, I'm going to wear a mask. The longer that we try and say we're not going to do this, the longer this is going to go. And we can't just continue like this.
That is what is holding theater almost in every particular case. And this is just secondhand, but the trying to make sure that the audience and the who is it on this, and the actors and whatnot, that everybody is safe when you're bringing that many people together is
right.
And it has been the resistance to wearing a mask that has stopped all theater, because it has increased the danger of not being able to mitigate that. So they're working on that really hard right now to figure out how can they put those things into place that will keep the audience safe. It's priority one.
But I think that
go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think the need for artistic expression is fundamental, as Brett's talking about the theme, and it actually was from Star Trek, I think. It's adopted to the book. But you think about the popular theories of human motivation, like if anybody is familiar with Abraham Maslow, there's this hierarchy of needs, and we start out with survival and move up to meet our social needs and then our ego needs. And self-actualization is always the last thing at the top. And that's where artistic expression in theory comes, except that is not based on any scientific fact. That's just a nice idea that a lot of people like because it feels good. But in fact, we've had cave dwelling art for 40 or 50,000 years. Why did those people do that? They were not safe. They were not meeting other needs. They had this need for self-expression, to inform us, to inspire us, to record us, to challenge us. And that's what's happening. As Jim brought up, this is happening. There are so many creative ways that artists are now expressing their art that it's amazing. It's just not what we're used to. Northern Sky here in Door County is just, they've gone crazy with just being creative in ways to deal with their customers. And you know, people are going to keep creating art no matter. It's just gonna happen. And that's in this book. I mean, why would these people be going around, not even to towns, but just to, you know, gas stations where a bunch of people were safe and hanging out, empty Walmarts, to perform Shakespeare and play music? It's this basic need that's way beyond survival. I think it's the core of our humanity.
Catherine, you know, in many ways, as a writer, it's your job to enrich others' lives, and you know, whether by design or by accident. That's kind of what happens when a writer does their job well. how does it feel for you? I mean, where do you find that kind of contentment or centeredness in the midst of all of this chaos that's around us?
I don't know if it's contentment or centeredness. I can just say that I'm trying to make the world a better place every day. And if that means that I tell some kind of story, and I'm a nonfiction writer and a poet. If I tell some kind of story that has someone reframe their everyday reality, then that matters. And now, as I said, because of Zoom, I can lead workshops, and I'm pulling in people who normally wouldn't be writing. They've never done it before. They don't even know what it's all about. And they're trying it because they need something in their lives. And what they're finding is community discussing ideas, just like we are now, writing about it, finding ways to express it. So that's where I find it. I think it's a way of healing the world.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. In some ways, I listen to some of your stories, and I know some of you personally, and I see the work that you've been doing. And in many ways, many of you have had a busier year than you've ever had. And I wonder what motivates you to keep getting up every morning, right? What's the motivation that says I'm going to get up, I'm going to go to work today, and I'm going to do what I have to do and confront the problems that are there? Because frankly, all of you seem pretty well adjusted, with one person who shall remain nameless among you, that I probably isn't. But for the most part, you're all pretty well adjusted people and very resilient people. So what is it, what motivates you and keeps you getting up every morning and keeps you going back out there to do the stuff that you need to be doing in these extraordinary circumstances?
I want to answer that right away. I don't have to get up, but I'm here, so I might as well do something. And if I'm here, I might as well make the most of it. I mean, there's always something to be learned and shared in anything that we do. And the more work that we do, the more we're connected to the people around us, even if we're distanced. So we can make things, we can reframe the world. And I still have a vision for so many things. Renewable energy is one in my life, having a sustainable culture. So I'm still working at that. That doesn't stop. And maybe because we've had some kind of terrible shift and danger, maybe that's an opportunity to try some new things and make some new things happen.
I think I can answer that very quickly too. I am one of the fortunate people. I love what I do. I love the work that I do, and I think I'm good at it. I just didn't plan to be working as hard at it right now as I am. I'm way past the 65 retirement age, and I never envisioned retiring, but I did envision kind of cutting back a little bit. And so my customers, so to speak, my clients have kept me busier, but I jump out of bed in the morning because I got another day of working with people, and every client, every case is different. And when it stops being fun, I'll stop doing it.
Karen, why do you keep
Yeah.
doing what you do?
Because I have a business that's open every day, and I have staff that needs us, and I have customers that need us, and it's not an option to stay in bed.
Well, but it is. I mean, it really is.
Not really.
You can pack up and go to Tahiti and say the heck with it.
Yeah, there's no one making
So
you do this.
you choose to be responsible, and that's great.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's my choice.
It's a good one.
When sometimes I don't mean to be morbid, but I'll work with clients who are struggling with parenthood, and they're just frazzled, and even more so now. Imagine a parent trying to go to work if they can, be a tutor to their children, be a spouse, and they'll say, sometimes I wish I could just pack up and leave. And I say, you can, and people do it every day. Parents abandon their children. Why don't you? Because you choose not to, and endure whatever it is that you're enduring, and find somewhere that resilience. But people do despicable things, and we try to keep them from doing that and try to give them the resources to stay with it. But sometimes it's Well, the ultimate is suicide, and that's checking out completely. And some people do it. So when someone says suicide's not an option, actually it really is. And every day that you're still alive, you're choosing not to do that.
Yeah, and I think the biggest privilege in the world is the opportunity to make a difference. And that may sound a little saccharine, but and I'm not the kind of person that loves sunshine. People that know me, but I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I mean, I've been able to really take a really horrible situation and try and make a difference, and hopefully I have. And also, I have not lost a day of work. I have not lost a penny of income, whereas so many people have not been so fortunate. So you know that it's just gratitude. I mean, I have nothing to complain about. And has it been hard work? Absolutely. But boy, it is not. You know, it's sort of, you go into medicine because you kind of want to help people. And again, that's one of those little trite things. I want to help someone, but you really do. And when you finally get to, it's really cool. And so this, is as challenging it has been. It has not been outweighed by the fact that we're incredibly privileged, and Dennis in the same situation. We're incredibly privileged to be able to touch people the way we do.
I totally agree that that whole, it does give you tremendous meaning. I feel so fortunate to be able to work with a team of people that have that. The first priority is to help others succeed. And it's something that filters through our whole culture at Destination Dark County. And I also work in an industry, especially within the membership industry, that is, we're all hopeless helpers. We live to assist and help others, help lift them up however we can. And I've been so well connected, especially through this, with colleagues across the United States and overseas, that just sharing experiences and brainstorming new ideas and ways that we can help. And I have two different groups, but one that we meets every week. We get together for at least an hour, sometimes two, and we've never been short of the topic of how can we do a better job helping. Who are the people we're missing? Who how do we find them? How do we help? And that has helped through all of this tremendously.
There was a comment in the chat that Ann Bernstein made, which is that what keeps everybody moving forward in some ways is hope for the future, right? Hope for something better. And I think as our time is wrapping up, I'd like to ask one final question sort of along those lines, and that, no one really knows what normal life, quote unquote, is going to look like when this is over, but hopefully it's something closer to the normal we knew than what we have right now. I wonder, what's the one thing that you are hoping for the most? What are you most looking forward to returning to when we approach some kind of normalcy? And we'll just go right across the top here. Dennis, what are you thinking?
Well, aside from hanging out with my grandson, I'm a grandfather for the first time for about 2 years now. It's going back to youth exchange conferences and visiting my friends all around the world. There's just nothing like it. And we are all isolated, and as they say, it sucks. So I'm really looking forward to that. Someday I'll be going to these different countries and seeing these great friends.
Karen?
I think, well, for one thing, I want to quit wearing a mask because I hate it. And the second thing, I just think I have a pretty big bubble right now, but there's some very important people that are missing from it. And I just want to be able to see them and spend time with them a little bit. Otherwise, I am so grateful for being here because our world has not changed anywhere near as much as it has changed for the majority of people in this country. And I'm so grateful for that. So in a lot of ways, my world is not all that different.
Phil?
The first and foremost is to be able to just hug on my kids. That's been hard because they're young adults and they're out there, and because of work, they have, they're not able to work remotely. our youngest is off to college and decided to stay there instead of bringing anything back, as we've been very cautious to help ensure safety of close family that we're interacting with. But yeah, I'm a big hugger, and it's been hard to not have that. Like to throw a big paint tarp over me and just go hug everybody. Just, it's been a long haul in that regard.
Indeed. Jim.
Family is obvious, being able to get together with family, although we're pretty blessed and have been able to do that. But I would say travel and getting together with 300 plus of my closest friends who I don't know in a darkened theater, either watching a play or watching a symphony concert, or even a movie. I mean, just things that you didn't ever think were a big deal. And for heaven's sake, going back to Disney World, I can't wait to do that.
And probably because this is the big read, it makes most sense to give the final word to our writer, Catherine. What are you most looking forward to?
Potluck suppers, many of them and frequently. I can't think of anything better than getting together, sharing food, which is unmasked, and sharing stories over the food.
Indeed. I think that's something we're all looking forward to. Well, thank you all panelists for joining us today for this conversation. Thank you for those of you who've been watching from home through Zoom or Facebook Live. We appreciate this opportunity to share. And I know that our friend Jared here has from Right on Door County has a few final words.
Great. Thank you all so much. This was a wonderful conversation. Bret, thank you for stepping in last minute to facilitate and helping us out. It was wonderful to hear all of you. I do want to let you know about some more programs that are coming up for the NEA Big Read. Tomorrow at 11 a.m. there is a Bring Your Own Lunch Brunch quiz. So those of you who really know the book intimately well, Karen, you're on a trivia team. Maybe you can win a fabulous prize during this. Then on Wednesday, Ann Moser of the UW Water Library will be giving a talk on literature with a sense of place. That's at 6 p.m. And then, of course, on Thursday at 7 p.m., the author Emily St. John Mandel will be with us to talk about Station 11. And then a week from today at 2 o'clock, Emily will be joined by novelist and screenwriter Patrick Somerville to talk about the adaptation of Station 11 to the screen for HBO Max. So all great programming coming up, as well as this wonderful program today. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.